Okay, leaders, here's a hard truth for you. Working harder will not elevate your leadership impact. In fact, it's exactly what holds a lot of leaders back, even though it is the thing that we are taught to do. So we're going to dive into that today. Welcome back to another episode of Being at Work. I'm your host, Andrea Butcher, and this episode is at the heart of how leaders create impact without burning out themselves or the people around them. And I am joined today by a very special guest, Mike Miles. Mike works with leaders who want greater influence, opportunity, and responsibility, but don't want to sacrifice their health, relationships, or sense of self to get there. Mike believes leadership impact doesn't come from doing more. It comes from changing how you lead. In our conversation, we're going to talk about two specific ways leaders can elevate their impact based on the work that Mike is doing. We'll talk about building systems that create discernment instead of reactivity. We'll talk about contributing at a higher level without treating your energy, health, and relationships as negotiable. And this work is personal for Mike, as you'll hear in his story. So I'll turn it over to him to share that now. Mike Miles, welcome to the show.
Andrea, it's such a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Why don't we start with that story?
Why is it so personal for you?
So years ago, about 1 million years ago, one of my first leadership roles, I happened to be leading an engineering team for a pre-IPO tech company. And we were all excited to go public. We had done the work to file our S1. Our CEO was actually on tour with some of our investment bankers, trying to drum up interest for investing in the company. We had big Global 2000s marquee brands that were our customers, Ford Motor Company and Pfizer and Shell. Any Global 2000 company you care to mention was likely in our customer portfolio. So we thought we had it. Now, it turned out that there was a lot of work that led up to that IPO or that pre-IPO. For about 18 months, the team was working hard. My team in particular, because we had to launch a product near the time that we were going to go public. And so I was leading the team, not well. It was my first leadership role of any magnitude. So I wasn't showing up as a great leader because I didn't really have any leadership experience to fall back on. And I found myself compromising my own health. I ended up in the hospital a couple times, compromised my relationship with my wife and my 6-month-old son. Didn't spend a lot of time there. And I drove my team to kind of do the same thing.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what? We're going to go public. Our bank accounts will soon reflect the hard work that we've done. And then all will be forgiven. We'll get back to a time and a place where we can invest in our health and our relationships and work fewer hours and that kind of thing. It turned out that 9/11 happened and we never did go public. And I ended up laying off my team. I ended up losing my own role. And about a month after that all went down, I kind of sat in my living room thinking, man, oh man, I just feel terrible for the team that I let go. I feel terrible for the time that I lost with my son. I feel terrible for shortchanging the relationship with my wife. And I kind of committed to being a more effective leader after that. It's a journey, of course, so you don't just decide to be a better leader.
Right.
But I committed to being a better leader, a more impactful leader, more balanced leader, kind of as a result of that. Now, there have been milestones along the way where I felt like, gosh, I've kind of slipped back and work's been more consuming than I wanted to be. And I had to remind myself to be more balanced. But that was kind of the formative stage in my career where I felt like, gosh, I just need to be a better, more effective, more balanced leader as a result of that startup opportunity. I think that was the story you were talking about, but course correct if that's not what you were trying to draw out of me there.
It was absolutely, and I appreciate that personal experience because it shapes the work that you do today. I mean, it is the big why for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
So as you reflect back now, how do you think about that experience? I mean, do you recognize it as something that you're grateful for? Because it has shaped an entire career, really.
Yeah. We fall into a trap where we think, gosh, if I could do something differently, I would. But so much about where we are today as leaders are because of the mistakes that we hopefully learned from in our past. Yeah. And so with that in mind, yes, it was a terrible thing as I kind of lived it. But looking back now, 20 plus years later, it's not something that I would trade off
No.
because of the learning impact and kind of the shape that it had on my.
And you wouldn't be where you are today doing the work that you're doing in the way that you're doing it.
And most of the impactful lessons come from, I think, those hard lessons. They don't come from reading a book.
Right. You got it. It is personal. So the desire to do more, I mean, no doubt everyone listening can relate to that. And I naturally was thinking about my own experiences through my career when I got into the grind, the hustle, because you see the light at the end of the tunnel and you think it's going to all be worth it and you're compromising. You rationalize the compromise along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about the desire to do more. Like, what is that? Where does that come from? How do you talk to clients about that?
Doing more, I think, at least for this podcast, can kind of neatly fall into two different dimensions. More could be quantity. And I think early in career, the production aspect of what we do, we want to write more code or deliver more widgets or sell to more customers. That volume is one way that I think we're most measured for doing more early in career. But I think at this stage in my career and your career and the leaders that we work with in their careers, it's not about volume. It's really about impact, the magnitude of their impact. And that takes a different mindset. That takes a different mindset from the one that you grew up in your career with, where quantity was more important than quality, I would say. And the ability to discern that and make decisions based on the quality of the impact you're trying to have, not on the quantity of the impact you're trying to have, I think is one big leadership shift that many people struggle with. Many people struggle with. Especially
if you've been in roles where you were rewarded based on output, based on quantity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if we did a poll, we won't do a poll here in your podcast, but if we did a poll and asked people to raise their hands, like, why did you get promoted? Most of that was that they got promoted because of the quantity.
Well, and it's I get shit done. I mean, it's a badge of honor that we wear. I've got the capacity. I can do more than you. And it's that mentality, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that habit, I think, as we grow into leaders, maybe leaders of individual contributors or leaders of leaders and on and on and on, unless we break ourselves of that habit, that translates not only into our own work and our own balance, but also in the leaders and the people below us into theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So it's a mindset shift.
Yeah.
That doing more is not where it's at.
100%.
So you work with leaders who want to enhance their impact, elevate their impact in some way. And you talk about it as human work, that the skills that elevate leaders aren't technical, they're human skills. What are today, what in your mind, from your perspective, are the most important human skills for leaders?
We used to call what I'm calling human skills, and I think what a lot of people are starting to call human skills, we used to call that soft skills. And I think we did ourselves a disservice to those soft skills because I think people treated those as less important than hard skills or technical skills that you're just referring to. But I think those soft skills, what I'm hoping we can now start calling human skills, are really the things that help you as a leader elevate your impact. Things like discernment, like, is this really a thing that I am uniquely qualified to do as a leader? If not, is there an opportunity for me to delegate that to my team? Like, discerning those kinds of things as a leader, I would consider one of the more important human skills. Strategic thinking, of course, like, we could go this direction or we could go this direction. Where is the team best poised to be successful given those two choices? That strategic thinking ability. I don't think strategic thinking only applies to your 5-year mission. I think strategic thinking also boils down to anytime you have a choice. Why do we choose A over B? I think all comes down to strategy. So strategic thinking, I think, would be the second one. And the third one, I think, is I'll call it EQ, or emotional intelligence, the ability to understand kind of the meaning behind the words. Give yourself the space to interpret what they're really saying, not just with the words, but also body language and emotion, and formulate a response that best gets the output that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
That EQ, I think, if I could reorder the three things I just mentioned, that's probably the most important one.
Mm.
Being able to understand what's really being said and respond accordingly.
Why do you say that's the most important? Why would you reorder if you could?
Yeah, I'm glad you're calling me out on that. I think it's because, as leaders, generally we're leading people. Like we want people to sign up and follow our mission or follow our inspiration or kind of join the journey that we as the leaders are trying to take them on. And to do that, I think you really need to understand where they're coming from. It's not everybody that likes the same thing that you do or comes to work with the same values that you do. And so to be able to translate the mission that you're on into language that resonates with them because you understand where they're coming from, I think it's hugely important. That's one example. Another example is, things don't always go right. Things don't always go perfectly. And to be able to, put your arm around one of your teammates and say, you know what, I get it. That was a mistake. What's most important to me right now is A, you're okay, and B, we learn something from it as an organization. And sometimes, you're a little bit annoyed that things didn't go well, or you think that they could have shown up differently and not made that same mistake. But being able to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and respond with encouragement instead of frustration, those things come up all the time. And so those are just two examples. I can give you 20 examples where I think EQ really comes into the workplace in terms of, touching people on a human level and making sure they're signed up, really deeply emotionally signed up to the journey that you're trying to take them on.
Yeah, and I see that as such an important human skill. And it's funny, that we have traditionally considered EQ and others like it, the soft skills, because they are the hardest things, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
To develop into. My favorite definition of leadership comes from Kuzis-Posner's The Leadership Challenge, and it helps to make the case for why EQ is so important right now. They define leadership as the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations, particularly right now. Think about how stressed the world is. Mobilizing others to want to struggle. You have to meet people where they are in order to mobilize them to want to struggle, don't you?
That's such a great frame for EQ. I just love that.
Yeah. I thought you might, which is why I shared it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we started with the problem that we're solving, this desire to do more, why the human skills are so important. So I think now we're in a good position to go a little deeper. All the work that you do, as we said, is around elevating impact. And you highlight two key ways or focus areas in your work that really help leaders elevate. Let's break it down and talk through those, get practical. Like if I want to elevate my leadership, how do I do that?
Yeah, I think all leaders start with this desire to increase or elevate their impact. If they don't have that desire, then they're likely not a client of mine unless their boss is making them talk to me for whatever reason.
And that can look lots of different ways, right? It can look it's not necessarily, it could be a promotion. It could be enhanced job responsibilities. It could be expanded responsibility. It could be more of what I'm already doing, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it could be intrinsic or extrinsic. It could be like, gosh, I know I could be a more effective leader. I want to invest in myself. It could be your boss or your team or maybe even your social circle telling you, hey, you need to be more effective as a leader because you're compromising whatever. So it could be intrinsic or extrinsic. However you got there, however you got to be working with me, I think elevating your impact, often we start with, okay, just where are you? What are the things that you would consider superpowers? What are the things that you think are development opportunities? What voices are you hearing that lead you to believe that those are superpowers or development opportunities? How is your balance? And how do you spend your time? Like that's our typical kind of intake assessment process.
And how do you know what your superpower is?
The thing that I ask people specifically is what have people told you you're good at?
Oh,
Let's start with
that's
that.
great.
Let's start with
Yeah.
that. Now, as we go, you may discover that other things are your superpowers as well.
Yeah.
But what are the things that you know because you've gotten external reinforcement are your superpowers? And let's rely on that for now.
Yep.
That doesn't mean other things can't emerge as we talk or as you work on some of your development areas. Those things might become superpowers as well. But for now, just what voices have told you those are your superpowers. Okay, so most of the initial work that we do based on that intake really is about, okay, of those superpowers, how do we magnify the relevance of those in your role? And of those development areas, what things can we ignore? Because, yeah, they're development areas, but they don't really, need to be developed much in order for you to be successful. There might be a couple that we need to work on, but.
And do you find that at that point, people are trying to position their superpowers aligned with what they want? I ask it because I'm going through the questions personally as you're asking them. And I find myself wanting to say, well, I think I'm good at that because that's what my business needs right now.
Sure. Of course. I think 100% that is absolutely true. What happens though is as we work together, over the weeks and months that kind of follow on from that, the truth gets told one way or another.
Right.
And it may not be like, I don't think you're intentionally trying to position something as a superpower that you don't fundamentally believe is a strength of yours. Most often that's not the case. But you may, that's the thing that you think you're doing today that you're good at. And so that's what's causing, that to show up in your conscious thought right now. But over time, I think as we have conversations and clients reflect on how things are going at work and things they wish they could have done differently and things that they saw went really well, as we talk through all of that, things will rise up as superpowers and things will rise up as development areas as we go. It's not, you don't have to be 100% honest and self-aware, I think, of that intake. It's just a good starting place.
It's a process.
Absolutely.
And it evolves and you add to it. Okay,
so that's kind of the core of what we do at Milestone. Now, you mentioned we have two focus areas. One of those focus areas is about balance. And balance for us is balance between your professional life and then 5 dimensions outside your professional life. The easy ones, like physical health, social health, are you spending time with friends and family and loved ones? Mental health, are you stressed? Are you depressed? Are you overwhelmed? Spiritual health, are you aligned with what you believe is your life's purpose? Spiritual health, you may or may not believe in a higher power. You may or may not believe in religion as a whole, but everybody believes, I think, in a purpose for their lives. And if you're working in a way that's not aligned with that, that's the disconnect, I think, between spiritual health that I'm talking about.
Yep.
And then the last is emotional health. Are you showing up with anxiety and anger and frustration all the time? So those are the 5 dimensions that we care about. And we have a very simple assessment like today, rate yourself scale 1 to 10 on those dimensions. It doesn't matter why, you don't have to justify it. Just today, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah.
The more important question that we ask that follows that is, what do you want to do tomorrow to move that in the right direction? So for social health, you know what? Friends asked me to join them for happy hour on Thursday. At least originally I thought I'd have to say no because work demands are too high. But you know what? I'm just going to decide to take a couple hours off work and reconnect with my social network as part of that. It could be, you know what? I'm not getting enough sleep at night. I'm going to decide I'm going to go to bed at 9 instead of 11 for a couple nights in a row and see how that feels. It doesn't have to be big things. But if you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, very few people say that they're a 10 on all 5 dimensions. Very few people. I don't say I'm a 10 on all 5 dimensions. But the trigger, we hope, is that people say, you know what, there is a small thing I think I can do to move that dimension in the right direction. And it's that we want to drive accountability around and a plan around and time on the calendar around so that they can be a little bit more balanced. One important diagnostic, I think, for being out of balance is, if you're in the same role, has your energy dipped? Has your creativity dipped? Does your team not show up with the same excitement that they did when you first took over the leadership role in that team? Those are all, not necessarily signs, but certainly symptoms that we want to explore. If you don't have the same energy, or your team doesn't have the same energy, or you're not excited to get out of bed and get to work, oftentimes that means that you're out of balance against one or more of those 5 dimensions that we talked about.
Well, and again, these are leaders that want to elevate their impact. And so what you're saying with this balance reflection is you can contribute at a higher level without compromising. It's ensuring, is that right? Or I suspect there are times when you will have to compromise. Like how do you frame this work?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because I think that the default or the conventional wisdom is that balance is kind of an add-on, or it's a thing that I'll get to once I catch up at work, or,
Right.
I see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's about 5 months from now. Once I get there, then I'll invest more in my health. What people don't realize, and this is very, very, very well researched, is that the energy that you bring into the office by maintaining your balance, the creativity that you bring, the ability to engage with people at a more human level because you got enough sleep the night before, has such a disproportionate impact on your performance and as a leader than anything else I think that you can do. You probably slept 2 hours the night before a big presentation and gone in and just not felt great about how that presentation went.
Yeah.
Or, maybe you had the opportunity to hang out with friends the night before and you got some insight by just the way they framed things differently from the way you were thinking. Like all of those are examples of, I think, of the dividends that investment in balance can pay off as a leader.
Oh, it's such a good point. So you're framing it as, regardless of the season you are in, look across these 5 areas, and the goal is balance in them because they're all aspects of self. You don't want to compromise any of them. And they also are also supportive to those examples that you just gave.
Yes. I think if you don't invest in those things, you might need to just trust me on this, but I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to challenge my thinking on this. It's just a superpower for leaders, is to understand the impact that balance can have on their professional leadership role. It just is transformational. It really is transformational.
Sheryl Sandberg famously said something many years ago that I have repeated so many times throughout my career, that on any given day, I am not going to feel balanced. And the way I've always thought about that is on any given day, but I can always, because life happens, challenge happens. If I zoom out and have a bigger picture perspective about what I want in each of those areas, I've got something to go back to, right? I've got something that levels me out a bit in the midst of the challenge, following the challenge. So how do you think about this on like a day-to-day? Like, do you subscribe to that like on any given day, I'm not going to feel balanced?
Yeah, one reason why this diagnostic that I mentioned is so important is because the thing that I mentioned, just rate yourself scale 1 to 10 on physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual health. That diagnostic is because it's going to show things like you just said. It's possible that, hey, I have a super important presentation with a client I'm trying to land tomorrow, and I don't get enough sleep the night before because I'm anxious or, wondering if I'm going to say the right thing or land that deal or whatever. So yes, there will be dips in that. I think what we really care about when it comes to balance is the systemic balance, the long-term balance, not the day-to-day. You're not going to run a marathon every day before work. You're just But everybody can spend 15 minutes getting up and maybe without looking at a device, just think, what's the one thing that if I accomplish today, I'll consider today a success. Everybody can do that.
Everybody can do that. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of systemic balance, that's a good lead in to the second focus area.
The second focus area. Yeah. I think one of the things that we find at Milestone Leadership, my consulting company, is that, first, let me tell you, there's excuses and there's reasons. Excuses are the things that you make up to tell yourself stories about why you didn't succeed. Like, those are excuses. Like, they're not necessarily reasons. Excuses typically are not actionable. Like, the wind was in my face, so I had a slower pace in that long run that I was doing the other week. Okay, like, stuff happens, right? It's going to happen. The wind's going to be in your face sometimes, or it was raining, or it was cold, or I didn't eat well, or whatever. Reasons are things that are actionable. So one of the things that we find, and sometimes it's an excuse, and sometimes it's a reason, but in our consulting work, we don't really care which is which, because our job is to kind of help our clients take that away, is that they feel like they need to spend so much time on things that they are not uniquely qualified to do. You might, Andrea, I'm sure there are things that you are great about delegating, but you could do it better than whoever you're delegating it to.
Yes.
Right? So that's the trap that I think we fall into. If you feel like, gosh, I can do it better, for most things that doesn't matter. So we have a framework that I've adopted. I don't remember the book. I think the book is called Who, Not How. But the idea is, if you separate the work that you're doing into core and context. So core are things that you as a leader are uniquely qualified to do, or the success of the organization will be better because you're uniquely positioned to do whatever that thing is. And that's typically things like developing strategy, setting team culture, developing the leaders underneath you. Those things are what this framework would consider core. There's a bunch of other things called context that you're not uniquely qualified to do. Those are things like running a status meeting, doing your books at the end of the month, filing your taxes, those kinds of things. You may be the best person qualified to do those things in the company, but your leadership impact won't be measured based on your ability to do the books better than the accountant that you could otherwise delegate that to. And that's the difference that we try to help leaders understand. Things that you're uniquely qualified to do, or if you didn't do them, the company long-term or the culture long-term would suffer. Like, that's where you should be spending the majority of your time as a leader, is on those things. And everything else, you should systematize somehow, or delegate, or in few cases, don't do it all. You can't not file your taxes. Like, that wouldn't be a good thing to not do. But you can certainly hire a CPA that does your taxes.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that we help leaders see. And especially for small and, maybe Series A, Series B level organizations, that level of maturity, it's very hard for the founder to disconnect, because they founded the company. They used to do everything, and they probably can do everything better than anybody else they've hired onto the team.
Yeah.
But I think that dimension of betterness is irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think the question really is, what's the most impactful thing that you as a leader should be spending your time on? And that's everything that we would consider core.
Yeah. Why is it so hard to let go of some of the context-related work?
I think it goes back to, especially for early stage companies, which are for us, maybe 60% of our clients are kind of early stage founders. They grew up doing that work. And so they know the gotchas in that work, or they know the little idiosyncrasies in the process, or, they're convinced that they're the best person to do that because they've done it so many times. And so getting them to let go of that and build capacity by investing in somebody else who can eventually do it better than them, I think is the trade-off that we want them to make. But it's hard. It's hard to give up things that that you used to do, and you're probably more qualified than other people to do.
Yeah, that only you can do. I think that's the key, right? The uniquely qualified. So freeing up capacity to do those things.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that we do is we ask our clients to do a weekly scan. Look at your calendar. Share your calendar on the screen if you're okay with that, and I can help you challenge your thinking on it. But I want you to pick 2 or 3 meetings this week that if you didn't attend, be thoughtful about what would actually happen. Do you need to attend that status meeting for that status meeting to be successful? Hardly ever.
That's so good.
And so if they can start identifying through that lens, like what is the thing that they feel like they need to attend, but the world wouldn't stop spinning if they didn't. Over time, they kind of build that muscle and the confidence in their team in order to do the stuff that they think that they're uniquely qualified to do.
Yes.
Another lens that we put on that is this concept called red and blue. So blue skills are things, Andrea, that you are super excited to do. You're great at. If you could do that thing all day long, your life would be perfect. Like whatever those things are. Red skills are things that you just detest doing. Like, ugh. And so another lens that this is phase 2 of that delegation thing usually is like, okay, you might be spending your time doing red things that you're not great at. So what's the support structure we could build around you for those red things so that you don't get bogged down in doing stuff that you're not great at? So it's a little bit different lens than the thing I was talking about a second ago where if you didn't attend that meeting, the world would be okay. It really is about, okay, let's play to your strengths. If strategy isn't your thing, it's okay as a leader because part of your role as a leader is to bring in expertise around you to help that team grow and foster. It doesn't have to be you in all cases.
No, buy back your time.
Exactly. So especially if there are things that you hate doing, because usually those things take longer, you're not excited about it, you tend to procrastinate, you don't do a great job of those things.
They're going to be energy drainers. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
I really like that added lens. It's so simple too, the red and blue. So much of what you have shared is leaders taking the time to reflect and be thoughtful. In our fast pace, like results driven, very demanding world, what encouragement do you have for leaders to make the time to do the diagnostic, to reflect on where you're spending your time, to reflect on activities that you don't enjoy? Like, how do we create more space for that just in a world that's moving so quickly?
One thing that we try to do with all clients, and it works for a subset of them, is we, as part of the intake process or shortly thereafter, is take a step back and imagine what your life is like in 6 months from now. Mm-hmm. And it's the best possible life. Like, we don't want them to say, I'm barely able to make it out of bed in the morning or I dodged a divorce with my wife or, whatever. What we want them is like, what's the most perfect version of yourself you can imagine in 6 months from now?
I love that.
And oftentimes that's, the business is running smoothly and I'm getting out in fresh air most days of the week. And I have time where I'm not connected to a device over a cup of coffee in the morning before I start my job. Or it's those kinds of things that show up. And if they can envision for themselves what that 6-month kind of perfect version looks like, that is its own intrinsic inspiration that I think will help carry most of these leaders through. It doesn't work for everybody. But 60, 70% of leaders, I think just that envisioning process is enough for them to commit and trust that they're making the right decisions.
Yeah, and then they're bought in because they've imagined a different future for themselves. Right. I always say the best way to predict the future is to create it. Imagine.
Absolutely. And that's such a great example of what you just said is if I can create this future where I'm more balanced and happier and the job is going well and whatever. That's such a powerful thing, I think.
And it is also so empowering. I think we spend so much time looking outside of ourselves for answers. And all of this work is about checking in with yourself and what you want and what lights you up.
Great. It's such a great point. Everything that we've talked about today is within anybody's power.
100%. So empowering.
You don't need to go get your MBA or whatever. You could do everything we've talked about today. You can start doing that.
This has been one big group coaching session is what this has been. And I would summarize it this way. You as a coach, your focus is on elevating leadership impact. And my big takeaway is that does not come from doing more. It comes from discernment, self-awareness, all of the diagnostics and the tools and the questions and the reflection, and protecting the work that only I can do. That's where it's at. What would you add to that summary? What did I miss?
Just a small tweak on the thing that you said at the end. Only the work I can do, or only the work that I enjoy doing?
That's the red versus blue.
Because I think you can shed both of those two things.
Yeah. Because imagine that. Imagine if you're doing work that only you can do and work that you love. Goodness gracious. Of course, it's going to elevate your impact. There's energy in that.
The world's your oyster if you can do that.
Yeah. Mike Miles, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for the work you're doing.
I love it. I just love kind of the fire that I see in clients' eyes about, gosh, my life was just a wreck a month ago, and now I can kind of see where it's going, and things are getting better.
Yep, because I'm making it better. Yeah, that's great. If our listeners want to connect with you, as no doubt they will, where can they find you?
I would be super offended if they didn't reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear what all of your listeners are working on. Happy to help if I can, but I'm really just more interested in hearing from you about what you're working on, maybe what some of your challenges are. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. That would be amazing if you did that.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Let's connect to go a bit deeper. How can I help you? Looking for an executive coach, a facilitator for a team or leader engagement, or a high energy, heartfelt speaker? Learn more and connect with me through our website at abundantempowerment.com. I look forward to co-creating something magical with you.